Welcome to the Andy Staples Show. Doing things a little differently. We're treating every podcast like an emergency podcast. Ari and I had so much fun talking NCAA violations and brunch and foot massages and all that nonsense that we figured let's do this every day.
Scott, you had a foot massage?
A foot massage? Oh, yeah, I've had them. They're great.
Let's go.
I don't like people touching my feet. I'm sorry. Is that...
I did challenge Andy over text. I said, how often are people touching your feet where you even have to know? And he hit me with the perfect dunk back. He said when he played football, they had to tape his ankles. I was like, okay, people have touched.
Yeah, you had a different person touching your feet every day.
Yeah, you got me on that one.
Yeah. So we're joined by Scott Dochterman, the Athletics Iowa beat writer. We're previewing the Big Ten Media Days because we were mostly SEC last week. You know, we gotta hit the other one of the Power Two. So this is going to be fun. And Scott, you are headed to Indianapolis tomorrow. I'm very disappointed that Burger Study, the burger place attached to St. Elmo, has closed, or well, same company as St. Elmo has closed. We had a fine meal there the last time we were all in Indianapolis together. But you're going to be there. Kevin Warren will be talking. This is maybe one of the two most powerful people in the sport. He just took USC and UCLA. They got a TV deal in the works coming. It's going to be massive. Do you think he's going to let us in on any of this stuff?
At the podium? Probably not. It's been, last year was really wild. It was as word salady as anything I've ever heard in my life.
Word salad.
And it was, you really couldn't get a read on much of anything. And so my expectation is probably right now, as we're all talking, and this is on YouTube, that he and about 5 other advisors at the Big Ten are going over the list of probable questions, and they're giving him non-answers to answer. So that I would be very surprised if we get any kind of news coming from him from the podium. It might leak out of there a half hour beforehand, but at the podium, he's not as good as he is when he's one-on-one. That's for sure.
He's a much better. Some people are better off the record. Some people are better one-on-one. He's definitely better in the small group. When you're in an official interview setting with him, I mean, he goes to the word salad immediately, and you don't win friends with word salad, but he has some go-tos. Like you ask him about anything, and he's going to come back to student athlete well-being and the just maximizing opportunities for. I'm like, it's like, I asked you if Apple TV is going to bid for your rights. Like, that doesn't have anything to do with this.
Guys, I want to take some credit for something right now, though. About 2 years ago, or I don't know, I'm losing track of time, but 6 months or a year after Kevin Warren got the job as the commissioner of the Big Ten, he was in Dallas, and I drank a beer with him, Nicole Auerbach, Chris Vanini, and Stuart Mandel. We were all at a table, and I pitched to him, Big Ten Championship, Las Vegas. And guess what, guys?
He's like, Big Ten Championship, Pasadena.
Yeah. He went up me, but hey, it wouldn't be that crazy now if there was going to be a little bit of a West Coast representation of the conference. And I'm not going to say that I'm the person that caused the Big Ten to expand, but saying that I'm the person that caused the Big Ten to expand. Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm glad you thought of that. I hope you got a cut. Yeah, what did Jim Delaney get as a bonus for the last TV deal? Like $20 million on the way out. Ari, that advice is worth at least $15 million.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say at least 1%.
1% of $1.1 billion. You're doing all right, man.
Yeah,
heck yeah.
I'll take you to the St. Elmo that's still in business with that money.
Or Harry and Izzy's. That's the Harry and Izzy's trick is the way to go because they share a lot of the same dishes. The shrimp cocktail is obviously the same.
So what's the place that closed? I thought you meant Harry and Izzy's closed.
Burger Study. They had a burger place too. And delicious burgers. It was fantastic. And
I'm ashamed to admit that I've never been there. That sucks.
Yeah, it was really nice, but I think that was a victim of the pandemic. But
I've never actually eaten at St. Elmo. I've only eaten dinner at Harry and Izzy's, but I've had the shrimp cocktail at Harry and Izzy's, and I've had a steak there. So can I tell people I ate at St. Elmo?
It's it's basically the same thing.
Okay.
And the last time I was at Harry and Eddie's, they did the spinatus, which is the most tender cut of the cow, and it was phenomenal. So if they're
This is where
doing that,
Purdue needs to
Scott,
be sending their recruits with the money instead of Chesapeake Seafood. Take them down to St. Elmo, get a shrimp cocktail.
well, St. Elmo's a little ways from Knoxville, so that's your problem right there.
No,
Knoxville,
I'm
you gotta go to
saying
USC.
Purdue's got to step up their game.
Purdue is a long, like West Lafayette is a long way from Indianapolis.
How far away is West Lafayette from Indianapolis, and how far away is
Bloomington? Is about a 40-minute drive.
It's about 90 minutes from Purdue to Indianapolis.
And how far away is Knoxville from Gatlinburg?
It's about 45.
Okay, so I doubled.
That's like Bloomington. That's
okay.
Bloomington.
Yeah, it'd be more like Bloomington.
All right, so then change the analogy to Bloomington.
Now, I will tell you, there's a place in Mooresville, Indiana, which is near Bloomington, but they have a place in Indy, or at least they did, called Squealer's Barbecue, where they do deep fried biscuits as the bread that comes with your food. It's tremendous. It is one of the best free carb, free bread situations in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, I saw the look on Ari's face.
I was like, yeah, it's like I pulled a muscle on my neck when I heard that.
it is tremendous, and they do a halfway decent brisket there. So, Scott, if you need something like that, obviously you're going to be in walking distance of a lot of stuff, but just making sure. There will be a lot of football to talk at Big Ten. I know that the expansion is going to be on everybody's mind, but I don't know, Scott. You tell me. Do you think the Big Ten needs to do anything or will do anything until Notre Dame makes its mind about what it wants to do?
Yeah, I do. I think there's going to be a couple of things that will happen before Notre Dame says yay or nay, and one of which is the media rights deal. And I'm sure that they're going to have kind of addendums, posted to it that if this
happens,
then this accelerates or whatever. But they've got to get that done because it opens next year. So they're going to want to get everything in line. All the networks are going to want to promote it and take the windfall from that. And the other thing is they're going to have to decide for 2024, what's the scheduling makeup going to be in the Big Ten? And they're going to stand pat until USC and UCLA come in, not junk divisions next year and then re-junk the schedule. So what they're going to do is they're going to try to figure out, should they go 3-6-6, like I know the SEC has discussed, or just like 2 permanent rivals and cycle through a little bit more frequently. My guess is it's going to be 3-6-6. It's such an easy.
It's very elegant when you have 16 teams to do it that way. It really works out nice because you get 3 permanent rivals, which gives you enough for everybody to have what they want, and then you have twice every 4 years for everybody else. It's the SEC thing. The idea that they would even ponder anything different if they're going to be 16 drives me insane, because they were talking about doing the 1-7 thing if they did 8 conference games. It's silly. Yeah, Big Ten already has 9 conference games. This would be very easy to do.
Exactly. And the only difference and the only hang up I think that the Big Ten has is there's probably not as many deep-seated rivalries that matter in the Big Ten as there is in the SEC, where there's probably 19 or 20 that really stand out in the SEC. There's probably about 11 or 12.
But you keep all the trophy games,
right?
If you have 3 permanents, that'd be the easiest thing.
The one thing I think that they could do, like Iowa's like Tennessee. Iowa has a ton of rivals. There's not one that you say that's their number one rival. But Minnesota, they played them for 130 years.
Floyd of Rosedale must be handed out every year.
Absolutely, it's the greatest traveling trophy in the world. Wisconsin, Iowa is the flagship rivalry of the Big Ten West, and then Nebraska, Iowa has turned into a really nice series. So if they go 2, it's kind of a Sophie's choice, if you will, of what rivalries you're going to get. Now, everybody else is different. I mean, Ari could probably talk about Ohio State. Ohio State has 2 that really stand out and want to play. What I think would make sense is go every 4 years, and then you could cycle through some other ones. Because, I mean, USC and UCLA aren't going to want to play Nebraska and Penn State every year till eternity. But at the end of 4 years, maybe Penn State goes from Maryland to Rutgers or something like that as one of their permanents.
Well, and I think like Penn State would like that because they want to recruit both those areas. That I always joke the ideal Penn State recruiting class is you get the number 1 player in New Jersey, the number 1 player in Pennsylvania, and the number 1 player in Maryland. Like that's the perfect Penn State recruiting class.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys look at the rivalry thing, because like it's interesting now that you bring up Iowa's, and Scott, you're the perfect person to talk about this. But you know, you have 3 really good rivalry games there that you listed.
Mm-hmm.
And like, as a casual observer of the Big Ten, like, I don't know if you asked 1,000 Iowa fans who's your rival, who they would like majority, like what would the majority be? Would it be Wisconsin? Would have been my guess. But maybe that's just because Brett Bielema has an Iowa tattoo.
Well, yeah, he does, because he played there, you know, and he raised some hell out on the bars back when he was here. But it's interesting because I did that survey this summer, and Wisconsin won, but it wasn't decisive because Iowa State figures into that too.
Yeah.
But Minnesota's its oldest rival. It used to be the fiercest rival. Nebraska is growing. Nebraska is actually its most hated opponent. And
because of the geography there?
Because the fans really chirp at each other. They've got, you know, similar fan bases. One is self-righteous, one is insecure, so that really doesn't work too well.
Which one's which?
Pretty easy to find out. But and then there's Iowa State too, like in the central part of the state, the most populous part. It's that is the big rivalry. So in some cases, Eastern Iowa, where Iowa City is located, it's all about Big Ten, and it's
so Iowa's got the most rivals of any college football program, without question, right?
No, that's
5.
Auburn.
They've got 5. How many does Auburn have?
Auburn has them all.
Yeah.
Well, you have Alabama in the Iron Bowl, Georgia in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. They got a nice thing going with LSU.
Mm-hmm.
They played Florida annually for decades before the divisional split messed it up, and they played Tennessee annually for decades until the divisional split messed that up.
So what I was going to say about the Sophie's choices that some of these schools might have to be facing if you scrap divisions is how, like, do you decide that based on which one has historically been going on the longest annually? Like, is that a good way to go about it, to preserve what's left of history? Or are we at the point now where that doesn't even matter?
I love that Iowa-Nebraska game on Black Friday. Like, I think that it's new, but it is one of my favorite parts of Black Friday now.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, you also have to, fans don't do this, but they got to look at it from the eyes of the other schools. Like in Nebraska's case, it's a new Big Ten member still, 10 plus years now. And Iowa's the only contiguous state that it has. So it's developed into a pretty decent rivalry. It's one-sided at this point. It won't be forever. But there aren't really any other teams that Nebraska would say, we got to play them every year. And you look at some of the others like Illinois or Purdue, you know, they have in-state rivalries. They play each other, but it's not one that you just jump out. But Illinois and Purdue play for a cannon. It's pretty cool. And and Michigan State's not, you know, that's ranks in the top 2 or 3 in the Big Ten. Penn State, Ohio State, when you're talking about TV executives, you need that game on the schedule every year. And then how do you filter in USC and UCLA? To me, I think you attach like USC to Penn State for 4 years and UCLA to Nebraska for 4 years. 2 of the newer teams. And really, I think there are some similarities there. I think that'll generate a lot of ratings as well.
USC, you attach them to either Penn State, Michigan, or Ohio State, and possibly 2 of them if you could, because those are going to be monster rating games. Those are going to be huge. Now, I will ask you, Scott, your preference. Paul Bunyan Trophy, Paul Bunyan's axe.
Axe, no question.
Of course.
That is the coolest.
I don't know if there's anybody on the face of the earth that wouldn't go axe on that one.
Well, you know.
I always look in that opening scene and the sequence of The Sopranos when, Tony Soprano's driving through and there's like this sign. And I always think that's Paul Bunyan's trophy right there. And I have to rewind it to look at it again. But man, it was like, wow, they got that trophy in there.
So, all right, Scott, you mentioned the TV deal, and you and I have talked a lot about this thing. And what do we think it's going to look like? Obviously, Fox is still going to get the pick of the litter. So they're going to have the big noon Saturday game. You're going to have inventory on the Big Ten Network. Do we still assume something's going to ESPN? And is there another package out there? Because adding 2 schools basically allows you to add a game. My math was corrected after the last time because, as we know, this is a bad at math podcast. Adding 2 schools basically allows you to add a 1-game-a-week package if you wanted to, and a little bit more because of non-conference. But is that where maybe a CBS slides in?
from what I was told from the very beginning, or when this really started, before it ramped up, was the Big Ten was going to look at getting 2 kind of primary linear channels and 2 primary cable channels. And so that would be Fox and either CBS or NBC. And then also, it has FS1, BTN, but probably like in the neighborhood of an ESPN. My guess is, don't you still want to have your toe just slightly in the ESPN water, even if that means that they get, a Purdue, Iowa, or Indiana, Michigan State game on ESPN2 at 11 a.m. or noon Eastern. And then I
think you want your basketball games on ESPN as well. I think that's important too.
And the Big Ten's been on ESPN every year since 1989. And it's been on ABC every year since 1987. So there is a long-standing relationship there.
And the low-tier Big Ten games that are on ESPN2 at 11 a.m. are kind of like a tradition.
Yeah.
It's like something that I have always enjoyed watching.
Well, exactly. You got 5 other games, and including one on Big Fox. And if you're not watching, Michigan State play Penn or Ohio State, but you still might want to watch Illinois versus Wisconsin or something like that.
Sure.
And then, as you mentioned, basketball, it's not the primary motivation of this, but the Big Ten gets a lot of good ratings for basketball on their Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Well, and that's where people go to watch college basketball on weeknights. Yeah. They're not trained to go really anywhere else. So, but you're right. The football part of it is the first and foremost. Mm-hmm. And I do think the world has changed, because when they last did a deal in 2016, you had to have some games on ESPN because ESPN wouldn't talk about you otherwise. Now, you don't. I mean, the conversation for college football is driven in a lot of different places. It's not College Football Live or anything like that. It is here. It is on Twitter. It is on Instagram. You can do it almost anywhere. So you don't have to have ESPN if you're the Big Ten. But Kyle, by the way, says it feels like blasphemy for CBS to pick up a Big Ten game in the 3:30 time slot. Well, the SEC left because CBS didn't want to redo the deal when the SEC added Texas A&M and Missouri. And they're like, no, we're good paying really low prices for this thing. And the SEC's like, great, we'll never give it to you again. Yeah. Thanks. Bye. And so now it's not okay, Scott, let's say they sold to one network, whether it's CBS, NBC, over the air type network. What choice game is that? Is that number 3, number 4?
How they do the draft currently is that they kind of go almost every other one with the ESPN family of networks and Fox. Fox always gets number 1. And then there's somewhere, and I don't know specifically like which numbers, but it's like 1, 2, 3, and 4, then 5. They draft the weekend in a lot of cases as number 1. And then with the 12 days, then they decide which is the number 1 game. Like this year, Fox got number 1. It went Ohio State, Michigan, but ESPN got number 2, which went Ohio State, Notre Dame. And right. So my anticipation is that's kind of the way they're going to be. BTN actually drafts as its own entity. And so it has to be strategic. And like it actually drafts Iowa, Nebraska every year first, which is, I think their pick is somewhere in the mid-teens. And because they can build their whole day around it. And last year, when you almost get 2 million viewers for a BTN game, it was well worth their while. So that's kind of about how it'll shape up when you have, maybe we haven't talked about it, but you might get an Apple involved or an Amazon, probably more likely right. Amazon. And now that, as you mentioned, there are 2 more teams coming in.
Is that your Friday night at UCLA or at Purdue or at Illinois or at Rutgers when it's a mega power, Michigan, Ohio State, one of those coming to them?
I think so. I think it's a perfect spot for it. FS1 has kind of taken that over the years. I don't know if they'll still be a part of it, but that to me is where it's kind of going, because Friday night still has a void, and I know coaches absolutely hate it because of recruiting purposes and going all over their high school kids, but that's when I'm in a hotel and I'm on the road, especially, but even when I'm home, it's like, all right, I want to see a game. And no offense to the American, I would rather see a Big Ten game, even among, Illinois, Maryland I'd rather watch that game.
Right, and that's why
those games are often the most entertaining.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because it's the biggest game. Like, road favorite on a weeknight is the worst bet in America because it is the biggest deal at the home campus that probably any game will be all year. And so they're going to be really hyped. They know that the whole country's basically watching. I love those games. And so, yeah, if they can do that, I'm all for it. That's when I'll be clicking on Amazon Prime or whatever it is they put them on. I've said that's what the Big 12 should do. I think the Big 12 should try to own Friday night with its new version of the league because they're going to be so evenly matched. They're going to have a lot of fun games. And so if you can go 6 p.m. Eastern time, Oklahoma State at UCF, and then throw it to Provo at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time for Cincinnati BYU or TCU BYU, something like that, like that's going to be entertaining. And now, if you got Ohio State at Illinois, more people are going to watch that.
Absolutely. Last year I went to Maryland, and Maryland was 4-0. They had a blackout, all black uniforms. It was,
and then they turned the ball over 7,000 times.
Scott, do you want to know something? That was the night my daughter was born.
Wow! Congratulations.
And I was watching that game in the hospital.
Do you want to know something,
I don't think
Scott?
I've ever
that was the day I was born 43 years earlier.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen a team play worse football in my entire life.
They were not very disciplined, and they tried to make up for it by throwing it all over the field against a team that's built to take advantage of that.
Was that like the most thorough ass kicking in college football last year?
It might have been.
Very
I think it
close.
was 6 interceptions. I want to say
it was I felt I got to the point
it
where
was
like
like when I
bad.
play my son on Madden and he jumps out to an early lead and I'm just throwing 4 verts every play trying to get back into the game. That's basically what it was.
It was like Drago Apollo after about
And the funniest thing about that game too, not that I fell victim to this, wink, but it was like Maryland was like the play of the week for multiple sharps that week too. So I was like, you know what? My baby's sleeping, everyone's healthy, we're relieved. Britt's is in a coma on the bed, just trying to recharge her batteries after a pretty long day of giving birth. And I was like, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna watch this game, throw a few shekels on Maryland. I was like, oh my God.
That's awesome.
Speaking of throwing shekels on teams and them disappointing you, let's talk some actual football. This is our Big Ten Media Days preview. So I want to put this to the class. Will this be Scott Frost's last Big Ten Media Days as Nebraska's coach?
Do you want to start, Ari, or you want me to?
I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know. Like, you know what the thing about the Big Ten is, and I'll let you take it away, Scott, is that there are multiple teams, even the teams that are pretty good, where I have a hard time determining what their fan bases and what their administration view as success. It's just like, will Scott Frost be the head coach going into the following season? It's like, well, what does Nebraska absolutely have to do in your mind in order to do that? Do they have to win 9 games this year for him to save his job? Like, or do they have to win 7 and look competent? Like, I don't even know like what the expectation is. Any sort of improvement whatsoever. And I know that you love to throw that stat around, Andy, of like how they lost 5 or 6 games last year by a combined 6 points or whatever it was. A lot of 2-3 point losses. But like, to me, it's just like, how do you define that first? Well, and then I'll tell you whether or not I think they'll be able to do it.
As our friend Bill Connolly from ESPN said when he did his Nebraska preview, sometimes when the same thing keeps happening to you, it's not bad luck, it's you. And that's the question that we're going to have answered pretty quick. Now, you got Mark Whipple taking over the offense. Pat Narduzzi complaining about Mark Whipple last year, even though Mark Whipple helped them win an ACC title at Pitt. But we don't know how much. It sounds like Scott Frost is letting Mark Whipple pretty much control the offense. So that's a big change.
Yeah.
Yeah. And watching this team for the last 4 years, and when Scott Frost came, I mean, Andy, you live down in Florida. I mean, it was literally the prodigal son coming home. As much as Harbaugh was, it was that times 10 in Nebraska.
Yeah.
It was like, finally.
He was the guy everybody wanted that offseason. And everybody's like, well, obviously he's going to Nebraska, but if we could, and there was a bunch of jobs open. That was
Yeah.
Florida, Tennessee, Florida State. There were a bunch of jobs open that everybody would have been thrilled to get him at that point.
He came in, he didn't even have to touch the ground. I mean, they loved him that much. And if he was any other coach, he would have been fired already, especially in Nebraska. I mean, 4 straight losing seasons. I mean, they haven't been bowl eligible since 2016. And that's crazy for that program. And so the mistakes that they consistently make in special teams and dumb penalties, in fundamentals, it takes away their recruiting advantage, because they actually, you look over there at the players they have versus most teams in the West, frankly, and especially in the skill positions, you're like, okay, wow, they should be able to line it up and do something. And they find more ways to lose because they consistently make stupid plays. And they need to be bowl eligible before they hit November. Let's be honest. Their first game will tell us a lot. They play Northwestern in Dublin, and they should
one
win
team
that.
they beat in Big Ten play last year.
And also, Andy was really quick to point out that we should be betting on Nebraska in that game a few weeks ago, and I was kind of stunned by that.
Did I say that? When did I say it?
I said, well, we're going to have a bet for week 0. And you're like, well, Nebraska, baby. And I thought you meant like that was like an easy bet.
I meant that Nebraska's in the game. I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I
pushed back on it. I was just like, I'm not betting on anything that has anything to do with
No, because this is an even year. So Northwestern's supposed to be good in even years. That's how these things work. So maybe that's our foot massage bet, where if I lose, I have to get a foot massage with you.
I mean, okay. And then we can make a bet later where if I lose, I have to eat at a buffet that's only lobster.
That's terrible. You're
See
saying
what I'm saying?
I will love this so much
that you get to lose and then you're rewarded.
I'm not rewarded by having someone touch my feet. That sounds like
Scott,
a nightmare.
did you like your foot massages?
Yeah, a little bit. Now I have very thin feet. I have like bony feet, so it doesn't feel as good as it does for somebody with maybe bigger, thicker feet. But I get a back massage.
So you're Fred Flintstone feet, Ari. It's right up your alley.
I actually don't have big feet at all. I wear a size 9.5.
We've talked about your hands, so
yeah. But
that's 3 podcasts in a row that Ari has shown his hands to the camera.
Well, I revealed my foot size, 9.5.
Freak. There you go. Yeah, I'm a 13, so
I'm in the middle.
Oh boy,
11 and a half. But
got a lot of.
Andy's a 13. Everyone.
Got a lot of work for that person to get up to the top there. But all right, so Nebraska. Mitch Sherman and I have talked about this a lot. Our Nebraska beat writer at The Athletic. There's basically a deadline on this thing, and so his buyout drops after the Indiana game on October 1st, and so we'll have a pretty good idea of what's going on now. They've got Northwestern, North Dakota, Georgia Southern. If they get past Northwestern in Dublin, they're probably 3-0 going to the Oklahoma game.
Right.
They played Oklahoma tough last year, and we don't know what Oklahoma is going to be. I think Oklahoma is going to be pretty good under Brent Venables and with Dylan Gabriel and all that, but we don't know what Indiana is going to be. They had a horrible year last year. Michael Penix is now at Washington. Connor Bazelak comes in from Missouri to take over quarterback. But it's going to be really how you do in these games. But post October 1st, they can make the decision. At Rutgers, at Purdue, Illinois. Like, those are games Nebraska should historically win. But at Purdue, we know this year is not going to be an easy game at all. Aiden O'Connell, maybe the second. Is Aiden O'Connell the second best QB in the Big Ten behind C.J. Stroud?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And they've lost to Purdue several years in a row now. I mean, 3 or 4 or something like that. It's on the road. West Lafayette traditionally hasn't been that much of a hellscape, but I think they've renewed season tickets at like 93%.
Oh, they're excited for this year, and they got Penn State to open. Like, it's they could be hopping. And so Purdue's my team in the Big Ten that if they win their opener, like, we'd be talking about them going deep into October, because they could be, I think it's either 6-0 or 7-0 based on how their schedule plays out. They got to beat Penn State. That's a big if, but I mean, that's not the team, if you're Nebraska, you want to be facing in that situation. Because
they throw the ball so often. It's really hard for them. They're a Big 12 caliber type offense, and that's really tough for them. But, like with Nebraska, they finished the season with Minnesota at home, and they are going to be, a steamroller up front. I mean, with Mo Ibrahim back, they're going to be very difficult to.
Tanner Morgan back for year 57.
Yeah, and if he's like he was when Kirk Soraka was there in 19, and now he's back, they could be very good. Chris Altman-Bell's back for 6th year. I mean, they're a legitimate. They've got most of their pass catchers back, so they're probably that number 3 team in the West that's got potential to move up. Then Nebraska goes to Michigan, home against Wisconsin, and then on short rest goes to Iowa. So they could, if they're 6-2, then you're looking at 6-6 with an offer in November. Is that good enough for him to keep his job? I mean, maybe they win one of those games. They got to win a rivalry game once in a while, because Iowa, they've lost every year, 7 straight, and I want to say 9 straight to Wisconsin. So they've got.
I think they stop. This is the year they stop grading on a curve because Scott Frost is a Nebraska guy, right?
Yeah, they need to. And this is the whole thing, is that the fan base really put their heart into him. Whereas with Mike Riley or any other coach, it's, you kind of reach that point and then you just say, okay, fine, we're going to cut bait. But they wanted him. He was one of them. They love him, and everything, it just has not worked out. And they've cut bait on a lot of coaches, and now here they are with Mickey Turner, Mark Whipple, a lot of other other coaches. That this is the final year. I think, and I don't know if 6-6 will do it. That's a place that they cut Bo Pelini after he was 9-4 or 10-4 every year.
Well,
and
I mean,
Mike
if
Riley
Nebraska is the team that they hope,
either.
If Nebraska is the team that their fans hope they should be, then they probably should be 8-1, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like the only game that they absolutely are probably going to lose is at Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, and that one's in Lincoln this time. So
it's in Lincoln, so even better.
Still, and new coach going to Lincoln, it'll be full, they'll be loud, and no balloons this year, but maybe
helium shortage,
exactly. But when you hit that month of November, I mean, you're going to be playing all 4 of those teams slug it out. I mean, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. And if your defense is not built for that, you will get ran over, and it will be ugly.
I mean, I feel like 8-4 with a 3-game losing streak to close out the year is passable, right?
Yes, I think that'd be all right. Given what's happened, I think they're okay with that, but they're going to need some trajectory. And
you also have to remember how excited they would be at 8-1, and then to finish off with a 3. I mean, that would be a gut punch too. But I feel like maybe we're at the win the games you're supposed to phase of Nebraska football, at least, because that's not something that you could always say. And I think winning the games you're supposed to gets you at 8-4, which I think is probably the benchmark of what I would expect from an improved program headed in the direction that Scott Frost was supposedly taking them.
Exactly.
Speaking of winning the games you're supposed to, let's talk about the coach who's always been really good at winning the games he's supposed to, has rarely been good at winning the games he's not supposed to, but last year he did. Jim Harbaugh. It's funny because he's not the lightning rod that he used to be. It used to be Ari and I could just go Jim Harbaugh and talk, and that was a podcast. But it's not like that anymore. He got over the hump. He beat Ohio State, but loses both coordinators. Josh Gaddis goes to Miami. Mike McDonald goes back to the Baltimore Ravens, which it seemed like he was on loan to them. Like, hey, let's see if you can call plays. Oh, you can? Great. Now we'll take you there.
Yeah.
So now Jim Harbaugh is back. He shot his shot for the NFL. That didn't happen. And so now you must be competitive. Is that going to happen?
Yeah. I kind of feel like Michigan, maybe just we'll say going into last year, was kind of in the same position as Nebraska was in terms of emotional connection to their head coach. I mean, would you say that's fair, Dochterman?
Absolutely.
They didn't want to get to the point where they wanted to, move on from him because they were so emotionally connected to one of them, coming back and saving the program. And it took a long time for them to get there. And now that they got there, and they beat the crap out of Ohio State, which gives you a bonus point. You didn't just win, but you dominated the game. And then you make the playoff. You're supposed to believe that they're turning the page and are going to be a perennial contender to win in the college football playoff as the next step, not just make it, And the question that I really have always had, at the risk of sounding like an Ohio State homer, but is the question for Michigan is, did they just get Ohio State in their worst year or at their worst time? And did they have their best team coincidentally at the same crossroads? Or do you think that Michigan is actually as good as they were last year on a consistent basis, enough to compete with Ohio State and to win the Big Ten moving forward? And I think I would probably lean towards the first option on that one. Like, I don't know how good they are in terms of like expecting that result year over year.
I think they are in contention to be the second best team in the Big Ten. I do not think that they're not in the same stratosphere as Ohio State going in. I think they are with Iowa, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan State as who's the next best team. Now, they have maybe the most advantageous schedule in a lot of ways. They have 4 straight games to open at home, but then they got to go to Iowa City, where they haven't won since 2005. And we know that, I don't think it'll be quite as big of a blowout as it was in Indianapolis when you're in that snake pit. So losing the players they lost, Ojabo and Hutchinson, Hutchinson was the college equivalent of J.J. Watt to me. I mean, when J.J. Watt played for Wisconsin, he was the heartbeat and he was the physical heartbeat. And Hutchinson played the same type of game. And then they lost a lot overall on their defense. I think they only have one guy up front back. Losing Dax Hill and Vincent Gray and Josh Ross. They were such a collective unit on defense and they only have 4 returnees. I think they'll still be good. And I think that their schedule sets up for them. I think they play both. Yeah, they play Michigan State and Penn State at home.
In consecutive weeks. Like, if they split those games, you look at the rest of the way, if they split those games and are competitive against Ohio State, I think that's a perfectly fine season for them.
We have to define good. Like, Michigan is always good.
Right.
Nobody ever thinks they're not good. It's about whether or not they're good enough for what the fans and the administration expect from Jim Harbaugh. It's like, do I think Michigan could win 9 or 10 games this year? Absolutely. Do I think one of their losses could be another 37-point loss to Ohio State? Absolutely. And it's just kind of like the idea of
but Ohio State may do that to everybody this year, Ari.
I'm just saying, like, if the previous 5-6 years before last year become the norm again, it's like, how many more years in a row can Harbaugh lose to Ohio State again before it becomes an issue to him?
I think here's what I think with Michigan, Ohio State, and now how they can measure up from this day forward. This year is not a good year for that, at least right now, because the offense at Ohio State is far superior to everybody in the Big Ten, and it's not close. But when C.J. Stroud goes to the NFL, and when Smith-Jigba goes to the NFL, and then they recycle to kind of the same way Michigan is on defense now.
It's like Alabama last year. Like, last year was the year to get Alabama, and Georgia got them.
Mm-hmm.
Not the first time, but the second time.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody's getting Alabama this year. Like, same thing in the Big Ten. I don't think anybody's getting Ohio State this year.
So if you think about it in this terms, and I'll ask you this, Scott, how many times does Michigan need to win the Big Ten and beat Ohio State along the way a decade for it to be a successful program for them?
4 at a minimum.
They are a long way from that being real.
That's a lot.
4 is a lot.
Well, if you start today. I mean,
if you take it 10 years down the road right now, I would bet my entire livelihood that they're not going to win 3 out of the next 10.
Okay. Well, your entire livelihood?
Yeah.
Wow. That's, I guess.
I mean, looking at the early returns of who they're bringing into the program.
To me when USC doesn't make the playoff in 3 years.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I guess if you give – so are you saying that they're 1-0 right now? Like, starting with that 1?
You could say 0-0.
Then absolutely. Now, if you want to say – because you're saying you're going to play basically 500 football. Not you're saying that. You're saying that's your metric for what to I would say 2 or 3 would be successful. 3, I think 3 is the high end.
I don't think if you're Michigan, I don't think you accept that.
Well, they've been accepting it for the past 2 decades. So
well,
why would that change now?
Well, they really haven't. That's the thing. I mean, they recycled their coaches. They went from when they had what's his? Oh gosh, dang it! You know, the coach after Gary Moeller,
Lloyd Carr.
Lloyd
Carr, and then Rich Rod, and then Brady Hoke,
and Jim Tressel's flipped it, but Lloyd was able to compete. Then when they went to Rich Rod and then Brady Hoke, they nosedived where Ohio State ramped up.
Isn't it kind of crazy to think, though, that the Lloyd Carr, Brady Hoke years was like, I mean, the Lloyd Carr days were like 20 years ago now. Yeah. Like, it doesn't seem that long ago because when we were younger and consuming football, like, it's such a fresh memory for me.
Yeah, Lloyd Carr retired 15 years ago. But I will argue that more important than anything Michigan did in terms of firing coaches, Urban Meyer coming to Ohio State.
Yeah.
Set
but as a
them on different
rival,
path.
you match that.
Yeah.
As a rival, you have to match that, right? Or
And-
you're not a rivalry.
And the thing is, Harbaugh built it, almost got there in 16. I mean, a fraction of an inch, the difference, and then it fell off. And you know what the biggest reason for that was? Quarterback. He had no quarterback. You know, what's that?
A bad spot.
Yeah, a bad spot. But and then 2020, frankly, he lucked out not playing Ohio State and Iowa to finish the season because he may not have been there in 2021.
Yeah. Because that's the thing to me that you answer that question. If you think it's 4, then I think they have a long ways to go in order to get to that point. I think if it's 2 or 3 and you count last year and, he has a year or 2 to kind of try to build it back up again and then get Ohio State when there's some turnover, like you said. But like the problem with the idea of thinking the way that you just thought in terms of, well, when CJ Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba, Trey Henderson go pro, it's just like they've got 4 or 5-star prospects every single at those positions marinating behind the scenes in order to take over. Like CJ Stroud was supposed to be this huge drop off from Justin Fields. And then all of a sudden, like now he's the Heisman favorite. It's just like, that's the way it works when you recruit at their level. In Michigan, and I'm not trying to drag everybody down into a redundant Stars Matter discussion, but like Michigan is not anywhere close to bringing in the level of talent. And I think like if you look at the draft picks over the course of the past 8 years, like Ohio State has like times 5 them. I don't know what the mathematical term is for 5 times more of first round draft picks.
Well, let me ask you this, Ari, because this team got smoked by Ohio State last year, but did beat Michigan and is trying to follow your Stars Matter blueprint. Maybe not as successfully as they'd like at the outset, but they are certainly trying. What do you think Michigan State's going to be?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that if they continue to recruit at a higher level, which they have been, there's no question that they are going to be better in a tough out. Like Michigan State's always a tough out. I would say that Michigan State is a much tougher out for Ohio State in the past 10 years than Michigan ever was, So they are recruiting. Them and Penn State are kind of like back and forth between who's the second best recruiting team in the Big Ten. And I do believe that always kind of plays out on the field. So, I'm just really, really stunned by how poorly Michigan's recruiting right now. It's like maybe he tried to take the NFL job and that's what torpedoed the whole effort. But, their class is a bottom half of a Big Ten class right now. And maybe they'll save the day before the end of the cycle here, but man, it's rough. And Michigan State at the same time is transcending into this team that's recruiting nationally and getting 5-star prospects from Massachusetts on campus. And I think they're finding out right now that it's hard to get them, but getting them on campus is the first step. And they're doing much better than they have.
It's hard to beat Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia for players.
Yeah,
it's hard, but they're the best at it for a reason. But Nick Terry with a good question on YouTube that you've made the point since even before you came to the Athletic that Ohio State and Michigan weren't really a rivalry anymore because Ohio State was so dominant. Does what happened last year make it a rivalry again, or does Michigan have to win a few more?
I think they have to win it again. Like, I mean, I'll tell you right now, because I know this for a fact, like Ryan Day is insane right now behind the scenes. Like, I mean, everybody in Columbus is like completely and utterly transfixed on making sure that doesn't happen again. And when you get that type of Ohio State team, that's usually a rough combination for Michigan. But, I do think that, for me, I wrote and it was one of the best stories or most well-read stories I've written at The Athletic was when I wrote the column after the game that you and I were at together. What year was that? The Michigan game in Ann Arbor?
2018.
Was it 18 at this? Jeez, God, time's flying.
No, it'd be 20. Was it?
Or was it? It might have been 18. It might have been
2019. I was at The Athletic already, so it's 2019.
Yes. And I wrote a column afterwards about how the rivalry was dead from that stadium as a result of it. And I guess, things can come back to life. And it certainly brought back some juice for sure, and it wasn't just losing to them or, coming short in a close game. Like they got their butts kicked in a physical manner. So like to that to me, I think is certainly a bigger step in that direction. But
the way the rivalry beat Ohio State makes me very excited to see that game this year.
Because Ohio State was soft last year, and you have to be able to. I mean, they hired an entirely new defensive staff, except for a few spots, and they're recruiting the positions that kind of caused that a little bit better than they have. But like the rivalry to me is a year-round thing now in 2022. Like, is it a rivalry because Jim Harbaugh beat Ohio State on the field? Yeah, sure, it's always going to be a rivalry. But like, is Michigan holding up their end of the bargain on July 7th when there's a kid making a decision that's down to those 3 or 4 schools? In fact, I think you can make the case that Michigan's not really even involved with a lot of recruitments that Ohio State's in, let alone losing to that or winning those battles.
Right.
So
Michigan State's at least trying to get those guys on campus.
At least Michigan State's like actually involved in recruiting players that Ohio State's interested in. I just feel like Michigan's off in la la land right now. So, and I don't know what the reason for that is. Maybe it's Harbaugh was clearly interested in taking an NFL job. And you know what, guys? And I think I said this on the podcast before, but I think that Harbaugh wanted to take the NFL job so that he could get out of the situation and go out a winner. Because I think he knows 100%. In his heart that this isn't going to be an easy proposition. And if people are expecting this to be the result, like I don't know that they now all of a sudden pulled themselves out of the situation they were in, which was, but not being in the same category as Ohio State for the previous 5, 6, 7 years. And if the expectation or the thought is that Michigan's ready to beat them routinely, I think he knows in his heart that's not what's going to happen. And, go out while you can. So, a very 4 times in a decade, I think would be a resounding success. And I would pay him. And if you could find a coach at Michigan who could beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten 3 or 4 times a decade, I think that he is worth every bit as much money as the other coaches in the Big Ten who just commanded $100 million extensions.
Before we move on to the Big Ten West, because I have some questions for Scott. My initial question was going to be, can Iowa throw the ball? But I feel like we need to go a little bit deeper into the West. I want to answer Tantar 99's question. Does Andy color his hair? It's unnaturally dark.
Do you?
I think I do not. I intend to go gray gracefully. I intend to just let it go. And it's gonna go here in the next, I'd say 2-3 years. So no Coach K for me.
Do you have grays? I don't even see a gray.
I do have grays in my sideburns. No, what is going on right now is there is a storm, like a biblical deluge outside my house. And so everything outside is very dark. I have the light set up it was a little bit lighter when I started. And so now the dark part outside makes the light weird. So everything looks darker here. So yeah, no, if we get the close up, no, you will see the grays in my sideburns. It's coming. No Just for Men for me, unless Just for Men wants to sponsor the podcast. That I will make an exception for. If you want to sponsor the podcast, I'll dye it whatever color.
I'm starting to get grays on my sides, on the sides of my head. So it's happening to me too.
Well, you get married and you have a kid in the same year. That's enough.
Listen, guys, we're going to be doing the YouTube live podcast episodes moving forward. So if you want to ask the hard-hitting questions while we're in the middle of recording, like is Andy's Dracula hair dyed? You can come in and do it.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like Corna BC wants to know if Wazzy is a preferred nickname for you. He thinks Wazzy would be a great nickname for you.
What's the person who wrote that? What's the person's name?
Corna BC.
Oh, I don't know. Some people in high school used to call me Wazzy.
Wazzy.
So I didn't know if it's somebody from my high school.
You don't look like a Wazzy to me.
I know it was it wasn't something that
and you don't look like a person who I would call by your last name. Like a lot of people call me by my last name.
Yeah.
Your last name doesn't like
I called Dochterman on the show and it felt weird. He's a Scott.
I've been Doc as long as my life.
Exactly. You got to be a Doc.
Yeah.
So
you're very knowledgeable. You're calm all the time. Like
I got all fired up, and
Scott
just like, I'm going to check out here. Ari, you freak out. I'm going to just lay back, and when you guys want rational opinion, I'll come back into
this. All right, let's talk Big Ten West, Scott, because you mentioned Minnesota earlier. There's somebody we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah,
we've talked about Iowa, we've talked about Nebraska, we've talked about Minnesota, we've talked about Purdue. The Badgers.
Yes.
It feels like this is when Wisconsin needs to reassert itself.
They do, and they have one humongous punch, and they've got a lot of work to do in a lot of other areas. They have as good of a running back as there is in the country in Braylon Allen. And as a 17-year-old, he was, 6'2", 240 last year, just rolling, kind of like Ron Dane with a little more speed.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to be just a hellion. Last year he had almost 1,300 yards. Didn't start till about halfway through the season. Almost 7 yards at carry as a 17-year-old. So this guy's going to be a machine. After that, though, the other side of the offense, I I'm sure you guys have watched the end of Rocky 2 where, both of them hit the canvas and they're climbing up, and appropriately they're wearing, red and white and black and gold. And that's kind of the two teams in the West and their quarterback situations, their passing game situations. It's like whoever can drag themselves up off the canvas and stand at the end of the count is going to be probably the champion here, because you look at Graham Mertz and what happened in his first game and then what's happened since is just nightmarish. I mean, he was 20 of 21 for 5 touchdowns in his debut during the COVID year. Then
Ari was very much stars mattering that one.
Yeah.
That was one of the best nights of my life, for being honest. And then, oh boy, kind of went off the rails a little bit, but
Well, and you had the Caleb Williams flirtation, new OC, which felt like a play to try to get Caleb Williams.
Yeah. And, he 10 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, less than a 60% completion percentage. They lost their top 3 pass catchers, and Danny Davis and Kendrick Pryor and Jake Ferguson, who's Barry Alvarez's grandson, had been there seemingly since 2008 or so. It just felt that way. I think Davis was a 6-year guy, and so they're replacing everybody out of their pass catching realm, and then they also lose some linemen. So offensively, they'll run the ball effectively. The gap counter will be as good as ever, but defensively, they seem to replace linebackers better than any program I've seen. They still have Nick Herbig, who will be an outstanding, maybe All-American, but Leo Chanel was terrific last year. Jack Sanborn played a long time. So defensively, they still should be okay. But it's really
like Jim Leonard too, who shows no interest in. Jim Leonard's such an interesting case to me because he was a very good NFL player for a long time. Mm-hmm. He made all his money. He doesn't need to go become a head coach somewhere just to maybe become a millionaire. That doesn't matter. And so we get to watch him put out great defense after great defense here. If everybody wants a game to just circle on the calendar, September 10th, Washington State goes to Wisconsin. So Washington State, new offense, which actually their old offense from when Mike Leach was there. But they hired Eric Morris, who had been the head coach at Incarnate Word, which is an FCS school in San Antonio. He's from the Leach, Cliff Kingsbury air raid tree. But he also brings along, now this guy also had lots of other options, including Ole Miss, but Cam Ward, who was the quarterback in Incarnate Word, who was a revelation. Nobody knew about him because he didn't throw the ball at all in high school. So he became a star. But I can't wait to see Jim Leonard's defense against that offense. That is going to be so much fun.
And I'm going to be interested to see if Washington State can tackle Braylon Allen too. But that's
I'm betting no. So
I'm betting 8 yards, 9 yards a carry. But so I think Wisconsin is in there. It's if Graham Mertz can emerge or reemerge and be the guy that they expected him to, wanted him to be, then they'll be good. They'll be the best team in the West. But Iowa right now is the best team in the West because it has 14 starters returning. Last year was a bad year for them running the football, but they've shifted around a few things. But it's going to be about passing game with them as well. They have the best tight end in the Big Ten in Sam Laporta. Probably, I would say, behind Bowers and Meyer, probably the third best in the country. One of the best seasons. It was very underrated, but had one of the best receiving seasons Iowa's ever had from tight end, more than TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant, or George.
That's crazy to me. Yeah. That list is just insane. And here's my thing with that, Scott, especially now that tight end has become such a valuable position at the NFL level and at the college level. When you look at what Georgia's doing with Brock Bowers, they got to get more out of it. When they have the guys, like the guys go to Iowa because they know they're going to get developed and get put in the NFL. That should be a massive weapon, and it feels like it's not.
It wasn't as much the last couple of years because they were growing up. It was
when they had Fant and Hawkinson.
Yes, it was definitely. And before that, the problem was both of them left after year 3, even when they staggered their classes. Fant played as a true freshman. Hawkinson didn't, but they both emerged about the same time. They both left, and then they were like, okay, we're not quite filling this hole right now. But they are back there. Luke Lachey, Jim Lachey's kid, is good, their number 2, and he's legit. He's going to be, I mean, 6'7", jumps out of the gym, and he's finally now filling out to the way his dad was. So he'll be a full service tight end, and then they have another one too. So it's going to be about, wide receivers. 2 of their wide receivers went to Purdue. That was kind of a big deal. One at the end of last year, but then Charlie Jones, who's the Big Ten's kick return specialist of the year, transferred after graduation because Aiden O'Connell was his best friend in the Chicagoland area and said, "Hey, why don't you come play for us? I'll throw you the ball 10 times a game."
I throw the ball pretty well, and Jeff Brom calls a lot of passes.
Yes, exactly. Now, you're not going to get 2.5 targets a game. You might get 5 or 10, so that it's going to be interesting because of the styles. The Minnesota's in the same boat as Iowa and Wisconsin, but they lost a lot of offensive linemen. They have the best center, maybe even in the country, but they don't have a lot of returnees on the other positions. Then Purdue, losing David Bell, losing George Karlaftis, I'm not sure that they have the studs that they once had that could just wreak havoc. Rondell Moore and all those.
Well,
Milton Wright.
That's why I wonder, Scott, is this the opening for Minnesota?
Mm-hmm. It is. No question. And, a really sneaky game on the Big Ten schedule to me is September 24th, Minnesota at Michigan State. I think this game could determine which one is, whether Minnesota is a contender in the West or if Michigan State could be the second best team in the Big Ten, just based on what happens in that game.
I cannot wait. Scott, when you drive to an event, sometimes you bring an ice chest and you load it up with all sorts of goodness. If you had a dream ice chest to bring to Big Ten Media Days, what would it contain?
Well, I think I would have to bring, some of the beer here, the 1939 Amber Ale, which is, was named after the Iowa's famous Ironman with Niall Kinnick. I would start there. And then I'd probably have to, for the IPA fans, I'd probably have to go with a Pseudo Sioux from Toppling Goliath in Northeast Iowa. That's probably one of the favorite brews from this part of the world.
Can I ask a would you rather before we get out of here?
Absolutely, Ari. Of course.
When you check into into like a Vegas hotel or a casino hotel, the TV's always on, and they have like Mario Lopez like telling you about all the cool things.
That's not even in Vegas. That's everywhere in the country. Mario Lopez is talking about the movies.
Yes, and they have it on loop, so there's like 10 different commercials, and it just keeps going back and forth.
Oh no!
Would you rather get strapped to a chair and have to watch that on loop for a day straight? Or would you rather watch a collection of Iowa's 10 worst offensive possessions on loop for a day straight?
I will take Mario because I know it ends. I think if I had to have Mario indefinitely, I might go with Iowa.
It's the same amount of time.
Yeah, I know, but I feel like Mario, he just brings more energy than Iowa's 10 worst offensive possessions.
I'm gonna go with Iowa's because I've done that.
There were a few games last year when Iowa creeped into the top 5 where I was like watching them. I'm just like, what? Like my eyes were bleeding.
Yeah. What is happening? Yeah, I know. And that's what if they could have just and Scott and I talked about this a little bit before we started recording. A little more downhill running would have done them a lot of good. That may be what we see from them this year, because if you go back to the Kentucky game, Tyler Goodson had already opted out. What did we say, Scott? 5.77 yards a carry. It was the best game they had all year, and that was against a pretty good defense.
Yeah, the 2 guys that came in, Gavin Williams and LaShawn Williams, both are freshmen, right? And they kind of switched off and on, and they are down one cut go. And of course, they ran a lot of inside zone behind Tyler Linderbaum, and that really worked. But by and large, that was better for them. Tyler Goodson was really good shifty guys with the Packers now, but a lot of times on outside zone, if it wasn't there and they had new tackles last year, then what he would do is try to dance around and move, and it was 2nd and 13 so many times that I could watch that on a loop and think I wish I was in Saw or something else.
Yeah, I just thought I've always thought it'd be torture to have to sit and listen to that. And go down to the lobby and check out
there's a worse one.
Steakhouse.
If you stay in one of the Universal Studios hotels, they have an ad. They had an ad for one of the Fast and Furious, whichever the first one that didn't have The Rock or Jason Statham in it in a while. And it's just Vin Diesel. And he clearly was just not into filming it that day. And he's like, yeah, come watch my movie. And it was just like over and over and over again. It was horrendous. So that one I might just go with the Iowa one.
Yeah.
All right,
okay.
Your mind is a dark, twisted place.
I was just like thinking, like, what would you not want to watch on repeat over and over and over again? And I was just like, that would be terrible. But like watching Iowa I was anxious just watching it. Like it made me uncomfortable. Like because honestly, they were a competent, solid offense away from winning a lot of games last year.
They won the Big Ten West.
I'm saying like further on. And like, honestly, if Iowa's offense was even remotely competent, they could have played with Michigan in the Big Ten championship and maybe won the Big Ten.
Correct.
Last year.
Yeah, and it went downhill when they had that full halfback option pass, and then all of a sudden they had a fullback running the route, and it went past his hands.
That'll teach you to get fancy, Kirk Ferentz.
There's a medical term for that, Scott. It's called grab ass. And if you have to play grab ass in the middle of a college football game, then that's the problem. Okay.
It's funny though. We just sat here talking about how they're never creative, they never do anything, and they finally try something.
No, creative and desperate are different.
Right. It was a great call. It was one of the very few great calls, but it was a great call. It just didn't work.
Well, I'm not sure if we're creative or desperate. I think we're probably a little bit of both. But this has been a pleasure, gentlemen. I hope everybody enjoyed. It'll drop in your podcast feeds, even though we're doing these live on YouTube when we do them. It's still going to drop in your podcast feeds every day. So smash that subscribe button on YouTube. Smash the subscribe. I don't think we call it subscribe anymore on Apple Podcasts. I think it's follow now. So please follow us on Apple Podcasts. And leave your reviews, leave your questions, and you can always ask questions here. Sad Night 65 keeps asking if he can call in. No, we can see what you type. If you'd like to ask us a question, type a question. So, like, can you call in? You asked and I answered. It's a great little give and take we have here. But no, if you want to heckle us, talk to us while we're doing the show, we're going to let you know on social media when we're about to broadcast. You can pop on, and it'll still feel like if you want to make sure you listen to it when you have time. If you're a dog walker, listen. If you're a mow the lawn, listen. Well, we'll be there for you wherever you get your podcast. So thanks so much for listening. Talk to you again soon.